wouldn't do this if I had any other choice. But he's my friend. So was I.
What's up, people, and welcome to my in-depth review of Captain America Civil War. I've seen this movie twice, and overall, it was epic, awesome. Now, I know most of you have probably seen my non-spoiler review where I mentioned some pitfalls and grievances I had, but that was only after my first viewing. My second viewing, however, 90% of those problems went out the window, and I appreciate the film even more. But that's not to say this film doesn't have its issues, and of course, I will get to those in this review. People have been praising Civil War for doing things Age of Ultron did, but better, and one of the things is definitely the pacing. In Age of Ultron, the pacing was a little too fast and you got a bit lost. It was rushing to get from one scene to the next. In Civil War, however, despite having just as many characters, if not more, the film managed to not feel like it was rushing from one scene to the next. The Russo brothers brought it again when it comes to the action. The opening scene was thrilling, fast and energetic, as well as the scene with the car chase with Black Panther, where he was chasing Bucky and Cap was chasing the Panther. But the issue in both those scenes, as well as the stairway fight scene, was that there was far too much shaky cam. I don't know what happened or whose idea that was, but it wasn't there in the Winter Soldier. No idea why it's here now, but get rid of the goddamn shaky cam. Fuck! The fighting was intense, just like in the Winter Soldier. They even dialed it up a notch in this. Panther was kicking all kinds of ass, and Bucky was devastating in that stairway fight. He was blocking bullets with his arm, hints to Bucky Captain America maybe, when Bucky takes over the mantle. He was just kicking the shit out of the SWAT team. He even took out all the Avengers. Keep in mind though, they weren't suited and ready to go, but it was awesome action nonetheless. Now, the action in the incredible airport sequence, my god. I'm sure you've all heard the other reviewers going, it's crazy, it's amazing, and there was no shaky cam, not even a little bit of shaky cam. Giant Man was insane.
Holy shit!
Spider-Man had incredible movement. Some people were complaining he may have been a bit too CGI, though me personally, I didn't really feel it or see it. It just felt like it was Tom Holland. It was him all the way for me. Black Panther did a goddamn Tatsumaki kick. He legit did a Tatsumaki kick from Street Fighter. It was amazing. I know that more than likely it was CGI, but it was so brilliant. I suspended my disbelief, and it just looked like, and I just looked at it and I thought, that was Black Panther doing a full-blown Tatsumaki kick. People can do that shit in real life too. And the ending action sequence of Iron Man versus Cap and Bucky was intense, and a lot of emotion and personal stakes behind the great action, and it also didn't have any shaky cam. Chris Evans once again kills it as Captain America. He's caring, he's the idealist, he's the definition of a true hero, and you feel it. His old school attitude really plays off well against Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark's futurist attitude. It's what makes this film so good and somewhat better than the comics. In the Civil War comics, Captain America was very angry, he was very aggressive, and Tony in the comics, despite his outlandish and downright villainous decisions, he was trying to be gentle and merciful, but it was kind of the opposite way around in the films. At one point, Cap nearly signs the Accords until he found out Wanda was on house arrest, something the comic book version of Cap never ever came close to even doing. But I feel this change was good because it showed Cap wasn't being completely selfish and that he just cares about people and he truly believes in freedom. This has got to be one of the better renditions of Tony Stark in the MCU. He's grown up, he wants to take responsibility for his actions. The character development he's had since Iron Man 1 is great. He's not as arsehole-ish as he was in the comics as far as I could tell. He didn't know about the Wrath prison like he knew about Prison 42 in the comics. Hell, the comic version helped build the damn thing. There was definitely a great balance between Cap and Tony and their arguments. In this movie, which still to this day has me struggling to choose a side, but I guess if you held a gun to my head, I'd lean towards Team Cap. The scene with Tony and him finding out about the death of his parents was intense and really gave a kick to the final fight, but I felt it took away from them fighting about ideals, which was the point of this Civil story, when they evolved it to making it more personal beef. That didn't really complement the initial story. I think Tony's parents' death angle would have been better if it was revealed early in the movie, as more of a motivational thing for Tony, rather than a crutch for the final fight. Bucky is played greatly by Sebastian Stan as usual. I love him because he's one of the more serious characters in the MCU. He kicks a ton of ass in this movie, but he also had some warmer scenes with Cap. The kiss scene was hilarious. Seeing Cap's two best buddies react to Captain America getting some tail was priceless. Such a lad moment. It just meant a hell of a lot more in this setting as well, with all the destruction and fighting going on. This is humour done right, Shane Black, and to a certain extent Josh Whedon. He's a good guy by the end of the film, and he just wants to go under the ice again until he can be cured thanks to T'Challa. I wonder what the future holds for him, clearly not being the second Captain America anytime soon. Sharon Carter was used well in this film. She didn't get loads of screen time, but she had a purpose, and that was to help Cap and give motivation for Cap. She shared an intimate moment with Cap, which I mentioned earlier. In my first viewing, it was kind of jarring and it didn't feel deserved. In my second viewing, I understood it a little bit better, and I saw the little nuances and the build up to the kiss. Since Winter Soldier, they've been basically dying to kiss each other. With all the crazy stuff going on, it's easy to miss that fact and dismiss the kiss altogether. I just fucking love Paul Bettany as the Vision. He has some of the most awesome dialogue about his thoughts on the Accords that I can't remember no matter how hard I try, but it sounded smart and it sounded like something Vision would say. The cut to Vision after the intense tunnel chase was classic. A bit of paprika? It had me dying. That is how you do a funny Vision, unintentional humour. He didn't kick as much ass as I'd like, but of course he was holding back because he's not trying to kill any of his fellow Avengers. He's trying to keep the peace. He did a little sonic spin attack on the Giant Man, which was cool and kind of funny at the same time. And when the Avengers were pretty much play fighting in the airport, Vision arrived and shit got serious. People woke the fuck up, which I loved. Some people have been complaining that Vision is absent for most of the airport fight, and maybe it seems like the writers don't know what to do with him. I don't agree with this. I think you need to put it in perspective. Vision is powerful as fuck. He's got a goddamn infinity gem in his forehead. He knows he's powerful as fuck, and he's essentially like a man playing with ants. Ants he wants to capture, not kill. He had to pace himself and wait for the right moments to inject himself in the battle. This brings me to Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch. She had a lot of screen time with the Vision. Obviously the writers planting seeds for a possible romance, much like their comic counterparts. I love their chemistry and their connection because of how they have both basically came from the Mind Stone. It makes far too much sense to not make them fall in love. Even though she buried Vision thousands of feet underground, that a power level was crazy when she let loose. I love how she's still an Avenger in training and how she kind of sets off the Sokovia Accords because she's still a bit of a noob. She's still growing and learning how to be a superhero. She's already a deeper character than Rey from The Force Awakens. I can't wait to see what she brings to Infinity War, even though Thanos deals with her in a few seconds in the comic version. War Machine, aka Colonel James Rhodes. He didn't really have much to do, but for what he did do, I liked him in the movie. I've always said I prefer Terrence Howard's Rhodes from Iron Man 1, as he felt he had more chemistry with Robert Downey Jr. But this movie, under the Russo's direction, he really shined. His fake out death scene was intense the first time I saw it, and I legit got worried for a second until Friday said she could read his vitals. So he's paralysed now, but for how long? I feel he can still get in his suit and get the suit to work for him. Maybe the suit will just like boost him up a little bit, I don't know. If you're not paying attention, you can forget why and how Hawkeye is involved in this Civil War. He owes Wanda a favour, her dead twin brother saved his life in Age of Ultron, and he even named his son after him. I guess he felt it was time to repay that favour, on top of the fact that he seems to hate staying at home. He also had some cool scenes in one scene in the prison with Tony that really stuck out to me. Him accusing Tony of being a futurist was a good little Easter egg to the comments, and showing that Tony is going too far. And then Tony was retorting back saying that he should have stayed at home and be a family man. Makes me think that Hawkeye is in the fight for good and won't be retiring. Maybe Thanos can click his fingers like he does in the comic book and make his family disappear. Now that would be some serious motivational shit for Hawkeye in Infinity War. Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow is again everyone's favourite female Avenger. She kicks some serious ass at the start of the movie. People usually complain about the trope of a 90-pound woman kicking the shit out of fully grown men in action flicks nowadays, but fuck me, she kicks ass so hard you really believe it. You see how it's possible because because of her speed and her skill and just straight up brutality. The Russos sure know how to do it, man. As expected, she plays both sides, but I assume she would straight up switch sides. She just kind of switches side naturally. She lets Cap go off to escape and is kind of forced to switch sides when General Ross wants her in custody for her betrayal. It will be interesting to see what happens to her now. After all, she's not with Cap in Wakanda, so maybe she's on her own for a bit. Maybe we'll get to see that Black Widow solo film after all. Ant-Man had a very small role, no pun intended, in this, but it made such a huge impact, pun intended there. He turned into Giant Man, which made for some of the most crazy, never before seen action ever in the MCU. And this is only Earth. Let's not talk about what's going up there in the cosmos. Paul Rudd was funny as hell, maybe a little too funny at times. I got the feeling that his humor was dialed up in this because he's with so many characters and has such little screen time. In Ant-Man, he felt a little bit more serious. He had to tell Louise to tone it down in that movie. In Civil War, he felt like he was the Louise himself. But that's just a minor criticism. It was still one of the standout performances. What can I say about Falcon? He was proving himself to be much more than just a sidekick in this movie. He was kicking ass as well, pulling off some cool moves and using his wings as a shield. Another callback from Falcon Cap in the comics, maybe. Both Bucky and Falcon were using their equipment/weapons as shields. Seems like they're both auditioning to see who will be the next Cap. I think it should be Bucky. Let Falcon be his own independent hero. But anyway, Anthony Mackie was hilarious as Falcon, but not in an annoying way. Everything humorous Falcon said was believable and situational. The line that cracked me up the most was Falcon talking to Black Panther, and it was like, so he likes to dress up like a cat? And Cap was like, Sam. And Falcon was like, what? You see a guy dressed like a cat? You don't want to know more? Seriously, that shit was hilarious. One of my favourite scenes that Falcon pulled off was when he was in the air and Vision was aiming for War Machine and Falcon dodged out of the way. That drop was just so sick, the way he just dropped down. He really showed his skill in this film. Black Panther was energetic, stern, regal, filled with motivational. He was serious. He wasn't dealing with anyone's shit in this movie. Hawkeye's all there trying to introduce himself and he's just like, I don't care. He had his own agenda, even though he was on Team Iron Man. He had some of the best character development in the movie. He was driven by vengeance, and after seeing what Zemo had done, what vengeance had done to the Avengers, what vengeance had done to Steve and Tony, he decided he was no longer going to allow himself to be driven by vengeance anymore, and wasn't going to kill Zemo. I loved that. From that point on, you could see he's going to be the hero he is in the comics. I was surprised that T'Chaka, his father, died by the hands of Zemo after it was speculated that he wouldn't be killed in this film, as he's killed by Ulysses Claw in the comics, who is basically Black Panther's Joker. And that dynamic is what personalizes their rivalry. But we'll see what happens in the Black Panther movie with Claw. At the end of the film, Steve ends up in Wakanda with Bucky, and Panther is firmly on Team Cap. I wonder if the rest of the Avengers are there, and will Cap and Bucky show up in the Black Panther movie? I doubt it, but it should be very interesting to see where they go from there. And now, the best hero for last.
Hey everyone.
Spider-Man. He was amazing in this film, spectacular. He was superior. You guys see what I'm doing there? Jokes aside, Tom Holland killed it as Spider-Man, so much so that people are calling this the greatest Spider-Man ever to grace the silver screen. Now that might be a little bit premature because we haven't seen him for as long as the other Spider-Man we've had. But what we got so far is outstanding. His humor, his interactions with other characters, Tom Holland's Queen's accent. Spider-Man is from Queens and he finally has a Queen's accent. It made that moment with Captain America all the more magical when Cap said, "You got heart, kid. Where you from?" "Queens." And Cap's like, "I'm from Brooklyn." It was such a comic book moment that just makes you love the MCU more and more. His conversation with Tony, which I think should have used the great power comes great responsibility line, was really good and made you understand in just a few words what this kid is about. He said to Tony, when you have the power to do something and you don't do it and the bad stuff happens, it's your fault. And I was just like, wow, that shit hit home in so many ways. He basically just said Captain America's whole logic to Tony right there and then. And Tony had the most subtle, somber look. He was like, I'd have loved it if Tony said, reminds me of someone I know. I felt his integration into the story could have been better though. People keep kissing Marvel's arse saying he fit perfectly into the story. Technically, as comic relief, yes, he did. but as a plot point, he didn't really need to be there. I thought maybe he would bring the heroes together or something, but it just kind of felt like a bit of an ad for Spider-Man Homecoming, to the point where they didn't really even explain how Tony Stark knew Spider-Man or how he knew he was Peter Parker, but hopefully that'll be explained in Spider-Man Homecoming. Aunt May's young looking and hot. Marissa Tomei, who seems to like Spider-Man headers as well.
Amazing! Amazing! Oh, it was like you were more inside me than anybody.
Everyone's talking about how young she looks. I mean, come on, god damn. You full well know Uncle Ben wasn't going anywhere that night with hot-ass May Parker sitting in his house. Apartment actually this time around. But despite how attractive and young she looks, Marissa Tomei is 51 years old in real life. And I think Marvel Sony are looking to keep this Spider-Man for a very long time. So by the time Peter is working for J. Jonah Jameson and has graduated from university, probably living in his own apartment, Marissa Tomei will be looking more and more like Aunt May from the comics. God, I can't wait for Spider-Man Homecoming. Baron Zemo, or just Zemo since he's so different to the comics now. People have been complaining about him being a weak villain, but I disagree with that. He may not have had as much screen time or seemed menacing, but he did serious shit. From blowing up the UN, framing Bucky, to awakening the sleeper agent in Bucky, to EMPing the whole city, killing Black Panther's dad, and finally destroying the Avengers from within. Let's face it, Zemo got shit done. They even gave him motivation and you believed it. He's already better than Whiplash, Malekith, Aldrich Killian, and maybe even Ronan. But on top of all that, he's not even meant to be a great villain. I don't think he ever was. It was always about the conflict between the Avengers. He was just a plot device to push that conflict along. But even as a plot device, he's still one of the better villains in the MCU in my opinion. So I don't get the complaints about Zemo. Zemo did his job and he's still alive, so we may get to see him don that purple mask that he has in the comics. The only criticism I'd give Zemo is that his plan was very elaborate and convoluted, but apart from that, he was fine. The story was very well done. You believed in the characters' motivations and why they were fighting, though some characters felt shoehorned in, such as Ant-Man, who it didn't make sense why he would risk everything he just got back, his daughter and freedom, all to become a vigilante again. Why? It wasn't really explained. Just because he wants to join the Avengers? I don't know, I guess Ant-Man just thought he was doing the right thing. He is a superhero after all. But apart from that, you really believed everything the characters were fighting for. The twist at the end with Tony's parents, I felt, while good and gave weight and emotion to the fight, took away from the ideals as the driving focus. In the third act, it stopped being about the Accords and became about Cap's mission, which makes me feel a little deflated and disappointed. It seems like Tony was going against General Ross's wishes and doing his avenging anyway, despite his strong beliefs that he showed against them avenging unsupervised in the first act. Maybe he was doing it in order to gain trust from Cap so he could bring Cap in afterwards, but I wish they had made that clearer if that is indeed the case. Again, the characters took centre stage while the plot took a back seat. Same thing in Age of Ultron and in Avengers 1. This is actually a good thing, especially in large ensemble films. It keeps the focus. After all, we've seen all the plots you can imagine in film nowadays. It's far more interesting to see these characters and how they deal with the situations they find themselves in. At the end of the movie, it seems like the Civil War is still going on. Team Cap is in Wakanda, or possibly in hiding somewhere else. Team Tony is pretty much only a paralysed Rhodey and a sad Vision, and a Spider-Man who should really end up on Team Cap too. So Tony needs to get recruiting. The Russos said Civil War will bleed into Infinity War.
I thought that the most compelling way to start off Infinity War would be to have the Avengers spread off to the ends of the earth in complete conflict with each other when the greatest threat that they've ever faced shows up. And it's setting the groundwork for Infinity War, but Civil War is not finished. The story will continue. The story of this family will continue into those movies.
So maybe at the start of part 1, we'll see one final battle between Team Cap and Team Iron Man before they join forces to face Thanos. In the comics, there was 2 big team fights, one in the streets and the other in Prison 42, and then they were teleported to the city by Cloak. We had the big airport fight, Maybe we'll get a final fight where Cap gets arrested in Infinity War and it ends up ending just like the comics minus Cap's death, because that'll just be long and drawn out. I don't think they'll do Cap's death anymore now. Now, some comparisons to the comic book. Is this movie like the Civil War comic book? Well, yes and no. It definitely has the spirit of the comic book, and that's what it needs, and that's all it needed to do. It had some cool scenes from the comic book, though I wish it had more personally. Like the airport fight could have started with the famous "You got 5 minutes" line from Cap before he places the EMP in Stark's hand. And the final fight looked just like the comics, where Cap was beating the shit out of Iron Man, but there was just one thing missing. Iron Man saying, "What are you waiting for, Steve? Finish it." That would have just been the cherry on top for me. Also, the scene where Vision puts his arm through Iron Man, that would have been an amazing scene to see. I know Vision was on Team Iron Man in the films, but I guess they could have done it to Team Cap as a reversal of that scene or something. In the end, it felt like the comic without needing to adapt the comic word for word, and that's what you can really ask for. Let's talk about some Easter eggs, just some minor ones. There's a ton of Easter egg videos on YouTube, guys, so you can go watch those, but these are the ones that stood out to me that I loved. Captain America's famous speech to Spider-Man, though it's said by Peggy Carter via Sharon Carter to Steve Rogers at the funeral of Peggy. At the end credits, we got to see Wakanda and the huge Panther statue. We got to see my home country of Nigeria in Lagos. That's right, it's pronounced Lagos, not Lagos, but Lagos. Get it right, Marvel, come on. And we got to see Spider-Man playing with his new toy given to him by Tony Stark. It was the torch that shines the Spider-Man logo in the comics. Spidey shines this onto criminals, but this one looks a little different as it has a little interface on it. Maybe Spider-Man can check his mail or receive phone calls, who knows, we'll have to see in Spider-Man Homecoming. It had the iconic shot of Tony blasting Steve's shield, and just the airport scene that was very reminiscent of the "You Got 5 Minutes" scene. I think the film could have had more callback imagery from the comics, but what we got was fine. I also love the reference to Empire Strikes Back, taking down Giant Man in the coolest way possible, just like the AT&Ts in Empire. Spider-Man calling it a really old movie was just the icing on the cake, and Rhodes' reaction is, how old is this kid? In the final fight, it was really cool how they called back to the comics where Tony scanned Captain America's fighting style. Little callbacks to the comics like that always rock. It's the simple things that can get comic fans like me super excited seeing this shit come to life. All in all, Captain America Civil War was a treat to behold. It just left me wanting more and more from this growing world, and it's honestly becoming like a drug, and I'm going to need one of these movies sooner rather than later. After my first viewing, I gave it a 9, but now after my second viewing, I've got to give it a 9.5. I'm going to go watch this film a third time. I've got to do this shit. But anyway, guys, that's my review of Captain America Civil War, my spoiler review. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and I'll see you again. Peace.